Evening. I'm Greg Siskind. Nice to see you. I have with me Jeanne Santos this week from Siskind Susser. We are here to update you on various news on the immigration front that happened during the week. I don't know why I'm hearing an echo, but hopefully that'll go away. We talked for a while to prepare for this one because there is so much news, some of it good from the week and we're trying to debate where to start. So I think we decided that we were going to cover a lot of news from the courts first, and then we'll get into the other developments, some of which are a little dry and some of which are pretty funny and interesting. So why don't Jeanne tell what do you think was the headliner case for the week?
I would say probably the case regarding temporary protected status, or TPS, for Haiti. That one is Miat versus Trump.
Yeah.
That's one that specifically targets the TPS for Haitians.
Yeah. So that's this.
And basically, 2 days ago. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Greg.
No, the case. I'm trying something new this week where I did a lot more screenshots than usual. So, bear with me. But some of these judges just are really going to town in the language that they're using in these cases. And this was an example, from the Haiti case. I'm just going to read the beginning of this case, the first two paragraphs or so. On December 2nd, 1783, then Commander-in-Chief George Washington penned, "America is open to receive not only the opulent and respected stranger, but the oppressed and persecuted of all nations and religions." More than 2 centuries later, Congress reaffirmed President Washington's vision by establishing the Temporary Protected Status Program. It provides humanitarian relief to foreign nationals in the United States who come from disaster-stricken countries. It also brings in substantial revenue, with TPS holders generating $5.2 billion in taxes annually. And then he goes on and shows a Kristi Noem horrible tweet, which I'm not going to read, basically saying that TPS holders essentially are all scum and horrible and ruining the nation. Anyway, he goes on, "So says the official for overseeing the TPS program, and one of those, her word, damn countries, is Haiti. Relevant here, 3 days before making the above post, Secretary Noem announced that she would terminate Haiti's TPS designation as of February 3rd, 2026. Plaintiffs are 5 TPS holders." Then he goes on and talks about their individual cases. But he this was a really serious issue because the deadline was coming up for the the news has been that DHS was amassing essentially an army of people to go into Springfield, Ohio, the town that made news during the presidential campaign because of the Haitian community, where they made those outrageous claims about them eating cats and dogs. And they were going to make a big show out of going and basically raiding and arresting all of those people who they, as the irony for this is these people are all here legally, and then they, with the stroke of a pen, turn them illegal, and then go to town basically saying they're removing all these criminals because they're here illegally. So that's how it operates. But Jeanne, I do you think this is sort of the end for this, or I guess this is just a district court who has the power to stop this for a little while, but we've seen in other cases that good news is followed by bad.
Yeah. One good thing that seems to have come from it, though, is that USCIS has confirmed on its website that employment authorization, so those with employment authorization documents, even if now expired, are automatically extended per the order in this court. So, and it is listed on the USCIS website. So,
yeah, so that was good. Okay, so that is that's that court case. What's another one?
Yeah, there was another one we were talking about that that court was saying that they again must let Congress the oversight of the detention centers.
that's not the right one. All right, go ahead. Yeah. So this was a case. I think I have a screenshot for that one, or maybe
Yeah, you did.
oh, here it is. Yeah, so this was a press release from Democracy Forward, but basically, that's a great organization, and we're co-counseling with them on the H-1B case. But this was a case on behalf of 13 members of Congress, and a federal court granted them the right to be able to show up unannounced for inspections of ICE facilities, which used to be pretty much uncontroversial when members of Congress would go in, and then the Trump administration um, not only didn't let them in, but actually arrested and members of Congress. There's a congresswoman from New Jersey, I think, that's going on trial. So this was a temporary relief for where the ICE has been barred from preventing them from doing it. We're going to talk a little bit more about this issue because the Democrats have some things up their sleeves to try and deal with this issue too. But this was a nice win for congressional oversight, I thought, this week, and hopefully this will be something that in order that will stick as opposed to being overturned on appeal or by the Supreme Court. So that was news from the week. What else we got?
Yeah.
There were a lot of cases.
Yeah, and there was another one that you were. Yeah, there was another one, the Dickinson v. Trump out of Oregon, that you noticed some of the interesting.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I got to find. I mean, I don't think I have a screenshot of that case, but this was maybe I did. This was a case, Dickinson versus Trump, and I just like this case because I don't know if I have a screenshot of the opening. Oh, I do. Yeah, I think yeah, here it is. It's in dealing with, it's one city on here, but basically this was a case where there was a class action regarding ICE facilities, federal facilities where ICE was basically tear gassing and using really harsh measures against journalists and protesters that were not on the property, but just observing what was happening. And we've all seen the video, but this one I thought was interesting because the language the judge used. It said, in a well-functioning constitutional democratic republic, free speech, courageous news gathering, and nonviolent protest are all permitted, respected, and even celebrated. In an authoritarian regime, that is not the case. Our nation is now at a crossroads. We have been here before and have previously returned to the right path, notwithstanding an occasional detour. In helping our nation find its constitutional compass, an impartial and independent judiciary operating under the rule of law has a background that it may not shirk. For that reason, as more fully explained, the court grants plaintiff's motion for temporary restraining order. So I only wanted to mention this case because, I mean, even though this order only has to do with the ICE building in Oregon, and it probably will, it's obviously this is something that will influence similar cases in other jurisdictions, but just the language here, I think, sort of was a good summary of where I feel like the judiciary is at this point, where they feel like they're the last bastion to preserve law and order in the country, that Congress is not doing, is not doing anything. And basically the executive branch is out of control, and the judiciary seems like they feel like they have to step up and usually they do it quietly, but the language that we're seeing in these cases is really unusual. There are other cases as well that, especially the habeas cases, where we're seeing judges really laying in about this kind of thing. So that was one I thought was worth mentioning. All right, we have other cases.
Yeah, do you want to talk a bit about the 39 country, the travel ban, and then the 75 country?
So we have some news today. The second part of our 39 country ban case was filed. The first part was suing over the benefits pause. And that case was filed in Atlanta. The other case was filed this afternoon in DC, and this is suing the Department of State over visa revocations under the 39 country ban. So happily, that case is moved. We've had a lot of we're working on a lot of cases at the same time. I know that some people are frustrated that it's like these cases aren't moving faster, and I appreciate the understanding on it. But happily, that case was filed. We have a 75 country ban case that's about to be filed, but there was also a case that was also filed by Democracy Forward that got attention this week from the New York Times. That was filed in Southern District of New York, I believe. It was in New York, one of the two districts in New York City. And that one is is going after the State Department policy to essentially pause indefinitely immigrant visa applicants at consulates in 75 different countries. So happily that was filed. It's good when a couple of these cases get filed because it essentially, it spreads the risk a little bit. And our case, that second case that we're working on, should hopefully be filed shortly. And we are about to start onboarding a case for the DV lottery.
Yeah, and we had a recent.
Sorry, go ahead, Jeannie.
I was going to mention that there was the previous case also, regarding the 75 country ban, that an injunction or a temporary restraining order was issued for. This case was brought by an adoptive mother and her two daughters. And so there was an injunction. And then shortly thereafter, the Department of State issued sort of a blanket waiver for immigrant visas for adoptive children in cases of adoption. So yeah. I think that helps.
That was good. And they, and that shows these cases that, they come at them from a lot of different angles, and you can start chipping away at it, which is sort of what happened with the H-1B case, where there were a lot of attacks on it, and then we started seeing the initial super broad policy on the $100,000 H-1B fee narrowed considerably. I will tell people that on that case, because I know people are keeping an eye on that, we're going to talk about the H-1B lottery in just a second. There was some news about that. But in our case challenging that $100,000 fee, we have our oral arguments on February 19th in San Francisco. So I've been on meetings lining up the getting ready for that. So that's the there are some other things going on in that case. There's a motion to dismiss that by the Department of Justice. That's going to be coming up, deadlines on that. But really the big thing that that's coming up is these oral arguments, and that'll tell a lot about what's happening. The other two cases are the Attorneys General case in Boston, the 17 states that sued on the H-1B, and then we had the Chamber case in Washington, D.C. Chamber lost initially, but their appeal has been set on a fast track, and the briefing was they're trying to get this done before the H-1B lottery, and I think the judge is basically working under the same timeline, but and that will hopefully happen. But that's there will be news this month on that case, so keep an eye out for that.
All right, and I think that's most of the cases. There was one other case that was helped along by a federal judge. We were talking about the case of little Liam Conejo Ramos, who's now back at home in Minneapolis, happily.
That was some nice news.
That little boy was in Minneapolis. And then
that's the big trouble. I think
back home.
ICE in their Twitter feed, or their X feed, I still call it Twitter, and I think I'll probably always will, but every day they post these horrible tweets about some criminal, and cheering the fact that they're and basically the impression they leave with their social media feed is that all they're doing is removing violent felons from the country, when that is maybe less than 5% of all the removals or people who actually have been convicted of like a real crime on there. This is basically what the most of the cases are this kind of thing, where it's basically it's just somebody who's has an immigration violation, and this is what this is how they're meeting their quotas. So this was obviously happy news. However, the administration announced that they were appealing this, and that they're trying to fight this and force this little kid to be deported. So I liked how they showed pictures of him on the airplane, and it was like with the Delta pilots and all that, kind of like taking him into the cockpit and all that. I don't think anybody in America thinks this kid is a threat to the country and needs to go. And the administration just can't read the room on it. But that was some happy news from the week. We promised some good news. This was some good news that little Liam is back home in Minnesota. So happy to see that.
Yeah.
All right, Jeannie.
Yeah.
We had some news on the visa front for two different categories. Oh, well, no, there's one other case I forgot to mention. That's the gold card case. So I don't have a screenshot for that one, but no, sorry, not the right one. So there was a lawsuit that was filed yesterday, I believe, by the American Association of University Professors and 5 individuals that were applying for either have applied already or are in the process of applying for EB1 and EB2 national interest waivers. And the idea is that, with the Trump administration for their gold card, the way it works is if you pay, I forget what the numbers are, like $2 million or $1 million or $2 million basically you pay into the U.S. Treasury. You just write a check to the Treasury and make a gift to the Treasury that you have extraordinary ability and you are benefiting the national interest, and you get to go to the head of a line and get a green card in those two very highly sought after green card categories. That's all well and good, except for the fact that there are quotas in those categories, which means that every person who gets a gold card essentially puts somebody further back in the line that was going through it in the traditional process. And the problem with the gold card is there's no actual place in the Immigration and Nationality Act that provides for anything remotely like a gold card. It was just something the president came up with probably one day in the White House, palling around with friends. And then, an announcement becomes a policy. So, basically his own Supreme Court has basically ensured that this is not going to happen. And the reason for that is there was a big Supreme Court decision a couple of months ago called Loper-Bright. Loper-Bright is a overturned 50 years of precedent under a case called Chevron from the 1970s. And every lawyer in the country probably read that case in law school. But Chevron, it was a case that basically said federal agencies, at least I read it for administrative law, but it's also in constitutional law classes. And that case said that federal agencies get a lot of leeway to interpret statutes and issue policies that are consistent in the federal agency view with the statutes. There were a lot of people who were fighting environmental regulations in particular, and those groups sued and said the executive branch had gone really far out on a limb and issued these all kinds of environmental regulations that weren't consistent with what was in the statute. So that was, made a lot of people on the left of center, a lot of Democrats and liberals were unhappy about that. Immigration lawyers, though, I think had the opposite reaction to that, which is, all these, really anti-immigrant rules that have been issued over the years that seem to come out of nowhere and are not supported by the Immigration Nationality Act. I mean, those are vulnerable. And actually, we talked about a case last week when I was out. Jeannie had mentioned that it got covered on EB1 cases in this thing called Kazarian, where out of nowhere there was this rule that seems to let USCIS examiners, who after somebody has met all the evidence categories that they need to for EB1, they can go back and say, you know what, I'm still not buying it, and you're not getting an EB1 on there. And a court in Nebraska said, you know what, that's not in the statute, Loeb or Bright, too bad, you can't do that anymore. And that's 20 years of bad EB1 decisions that are now, I don't know if you can go back on any of those and try again, but I probably would file those applications again. If you were denied for Kazarian, I would certainly consider taking another shot at that application. But in any case, the gold card is the same issue. You have basically, out of thin air, this interpretation was made that doesn't bear any resemblance at all to the Immigration Nationality Act. And, the conservatives on the Supreme Court and the conservatives, on district court, they love Loeb or Bright, and that is the strongest argument here. And, it might be just partisanship, and they just basically side with the president because he's the president. But I don't think that's the way it's going to work on there. And this is one where I don't think you can go to the Supreme Court and ask for them to rescue you when you get it, because this Supreme Court is the one who wrote that decision. So my guess is they're not going to want to narrow their own decision for the gold card on there. I think a lot of people have been wanting to get rid of Chevron for a long time, and they don't want to bring it back just to help President Trump out. So look for that one to stay. So that's the last of the cases. Yeah. We told people there were a lot, and there certainly were.
Yes.
All right. So we did have other news in the week. So tell us about what the story was with H-1Bs.
So H-1Bs, basically the big news, of course, is that, not unexpected, but that we know when the H-1B lottery will officially begin and end. So it's going to start March 4th, 2026 at noon and end March 19th, 2026. Lottery is a little bit different this year. Instead of it being just a pure lottery, right? There's this wage level weighted process where higher wage levels supposedly are, going to be given additional chances at the lottery. So
and that's something that's being litigated as well. On there, I think Jonathan Watson is suing on the weighted lottery. But in any case, a lot of people think this lottery is not going to get a lot of entrants. I did have an interesting discussion with some lawyers that were talking about a weird loop, a weird provision in the way the proclamation is written, because a lot of people think, well, because of the proclamation, people aren't going to file for the lottery. Like, why file for the lottery? If I'm going to have to pay $100,000 fee, I'm definitely not paying that. But the way the proclamation reads is it's in effect until September 21st of 2026, and there's a provision in that says that the president has 30 days. 30 days after 6 months, within 30 days of that, they have to issue some report on whether the president should extend or not. Problem is that the president is if the president doesn't extend in early April for this order, people in theory could file. If they get selected in the lottery. If it hasn't been extended, you're asking for an October 1st start date, which is after September 21st. After September 21st, there's no $100,000 fee, at least for now. So you could get selected in the lottery and file that H-1B application and not be subject to the $100,000 fee because filing for an October 1st start date. So that's very interesting. That there's I don't think the administration planned things very, very well. But I would tell people, file. for the lottery. If you don't worry about the H-1B 100,000, it's worth the $200. The case might be taken down in court before that. A lot of things, this loophole that I just told you may be in place. So I would say don't don't. Otherwise, you're going to be waiting until October 2027 to get a start, to get started on H-1Bs. That's a long time for companies to have to wait. So keep in mind, this is coming soon, March 4th, about a month from today. All right, Jeannie, what was the other H news?
So for the H-2B visa category, which these are for temporary seasonal visas for non-agricultural workers, and the U.S. government has announced, pretty significant additional visas being available for this year. They've added 64,716, where the annual cap is 66,000, 33,000 for each season. So that's a significant addition there.
Great. All right. So we had let me remove that. There we go. There's a couple. Well, there are a couple other things that I wanted to mention before getting to kind of the politics stuff. So this is one that has been in the news for the last few days. So a few days back, there was a whistleblower who came forward and said that there was a memo that was issued in May of last year, a secret memo, essentially saying that ICE could bust into homes with an administrative warrant instead of normally you would have to have a search warrant issued by a federal judge or a state court judge in order to do a search of a house to find somebody and arrest them and take them out. And that memo that cited as something that in May, and it was basically people who had orders of removal. They were using the immigration judge would issue an administrative warrant, which is basically allows them to go arrest somebody that's in a public place on the street where they can do that. But the what they have interpreted is that they don't need judicial warrants to go into homes or into businesses. They can just use the administrative warrants. And this is a memo that was issued a couple of days ago by Todd Lyons, who is a director at senior officer performing the duties of the director. I don't know what that means. Maybe it means that this guy has not been confirmed by the Senate. Anyway, Todd Lyons has issued this memo that essentially says what was in this secret memo. This is like this highlighted part. Civil administrative arrest warrants have been part of the immigration law since as early as 1798. And their use has been, you know what? First of all, that's not true. But second of all, even if it was true, it still doesn't say that you don't have to get judicial warrants to go into people's homes or into people's private businesses that are closed for business. And that is they haven't found one constitutional scholar to basically back this up. So this is one that is either going to be challenged. Now that this is public, there'll be litigation on it, or we'll talk in a second about another effort that's being made to deal with that. So that was news from DHS. There was also further news from DHS with Kristi Noem, who announced, of course, on X, that they were deploying body cameras to every officer in the field in Minneapolis. And then she said this it's going to be expanded nationwide. And then you can see Ron Filipkowski, who's somebody I follow on X, who's a good commentator, saying that they never release footage to the public from anyone. So having cameras is like, what difference does it make if you're going to basically hide all that? But if you have the cameras and they've recorded it, they're not then at least you have something for investigations to go after. But I agree that this is kind of a show by Kristi Millman. She's not doing this because she's happy to do it, and I would expect that we're going to see very much change because of it. But it's still positive news, and you'll take that where we can find it. All right, I wanted to talk a little bit about the government shutdown. So last week, the government was scheduled to shut down on January 31st, and there was a last-minute deal that was struck to essentially allow all to fund the rest of the government except for Department of Homeland Security, and that they were going to put a hold till February 13th. Basically a stopgap measure that expires February 13th for that agency. The rest of the government's been funded. In other words, on February 13th, ICE and CBP and USCIS and all the agencies that are under DHS, TSA, they all basically lose their funding on that date. And I think they'll keep some of them operating on an emergency basis, but basically they're going to run out of money. And the idea was that the Democrats are making certain demands that they feel like they have the wind against their back from the public becoming really revolted by what they've seen in Minneapolis. And they've asked for 5 things. And I just wanted to kind of mention to people what those 5 things are. 1, a ban on masking. And so everybody's seen, that ICE agents and basically these federal law enforcement officers are wearing masks. It looks like basically, kidnappers in a third world country that are, that are grabbing people out of cars and doing that kind of thing. It was pretty shocking, I think, for people to see that at the beginning. Unfortunately, I think people have become a little bit desensitized to that, but the Democrats, that's apparently are demanding that they have to take a mask off, and no other law enforcement agency in America wears masks like that. So, but Republicans, for some reason, that's the one that they are ready to shut the government down over. I don't know why they feel so concerned about that particular provision, but that's 1. 2, we mentioned already body cams, and that's one of the mandatory body cams, and for enforcement vehicles, not just on the on officers' dashboard cams. Essentially, that was their second demand. Third demand, we were talking about it before, but a mandate that federal agents obtain a warrant signed by a federal judge, not an immigration judge, before entering private residence or conducting targeted arrests, moving away from the use of administrative warrants using the form I-215. That was 3. There's actually 6 things. Number 4, the Universal Code of Conduct, the creation of a binding code of conduct and use of force guidelines similar to those followed by state and local law enforcement agencies. I don't know anybody who thinks that it's not a good idea to have more discipline on the part of ICE officers, but I have a feeling the Republicans will say fine on that one. We talked about this before about members of Congress having oversight over detention facilities. So, 5th demand is establishment of an independent body to investigate. Oh no, I'm sorry, this is a different one. The fifth was a guaranteed unannounced access for members of Congress to ICE detention facilities to inspect conditions without prior notification to DHS. So in other words, even if the case that is overturned that I was just talking about before, allowing members of those 13 members of Congress to visit detention facilities, this would make it law that they have to do that. So that was number 5. Number 6 is independent oversight, basically setting up an independent body to investigate allegations of misconduct specifically focused on the Minneapolis fatalities and reports of roving patrols in the interior. I'm not sure that goes beyond Minneapolis, but I think this idea of having an independent oversight board for abuses, that is very similar to what a lot of cities and states have. Like like Memphis, where Jeannie and I are, there's an independent oversight board whenever there are allegations of police abuse that are supposed to, do an investigation. A lot of states, it's basically like just random average citizens can sit on that board. It's not it's designed to give transparency. And it looks like they're trying to do something like that. So these are all good things. There's plenty of other things that could be done to improve the situation, but those are the ones that apparently that they're asking for. I guess that the deadline is coming up on the 13th, so we have basically a week and a half to find out what's going to happen on that. So that was that news. Then I had just 3 other things, I think. One is there was something really unusual that happened in a court case this week, a habeas case, and I'm just posting the post from X from a journalist, Paul Bloom. I'll just read this. DOJ attorney Julie Lee said, quote, "The system sucks, the job sucks," quote, to Judge Jerry Blackwell, who pressed her on why so many court orders are being ignored by ICE and the Trump administration. This lawyer actually asked to be held in contempt just so she could get sleep on there. It's crazy. But basically, I think I saw in one of a story about this that she is carrying like 50 cases. She has a caseload of like 50 of these cases, which each one of them are hard to do, and they are apparently there was a second thing that I was going to post that was kind of explains a little bit of what's going on, and this is Chad Mizell, who is the Deputy Attorney General, and he said if you're I think he's the Deputy Attorney General, but he said if you're a lawyer interested, no, he's a DHS lawyer, General Counsel. But he said if you're a lawyer interested in being an assistant U.S. attorney and support President Trump and an anti-crime agenda, direct message me. We need good prosecutors, and DOJ is hiring across the country. Now is your chance to join the mission and do good for our country. Why is Julie Lee so overworked, and why is Chad Mizell doing something that in my several decades of practice have never seen from the Department of Justice? The DOJ jobs used to be really almost like the most prestigious jobs in law on there, and the lawyers who went to work for the Department of Justice were the best of the best. I mean, finishing up at the tops of their classes at law schools around the country. They never had problems at DOJ finding lawyers. If anything, there was just a question of figuring out who are the ones that they wanted to pick from the huge pool of people that were applying. So the fact that it was necessary to post this post on X, and that other lawyer was claiming that she's so exhausted. I mean, I don't understand why she didn't just quit, but that's like a different story because I think I said in a post on LinkedIn that if you actually post on your resume that you quit your job at the Department of Justice in protest, that would probably help you get a job with a fairly big chunk of a legal profession that recognizes that you have to be a pretty bright lawyer to go to work for the DOJ in general, at least if you were there before the start of this administration. But I mean, it's, the first thing I would say to DOJ lawyers is like, quit. You don't have to do this. It's like you will have no trouble finding a job on there. But a lot of people I think have felt like they had some dedication to the idea of working for the Department of Justice and went in with some ideals for what they want to do and help fight crime. And this is where they are. There was one other thing that was sort of a third piece of the puzzle that for me on this that I noticed, and that Jeannie, I was telling you before, one of the high impact cases that I'm working with, impact litigation, the judge, I mean, the lawyer in that case is you would expect to either be from the Office of Immigration Litigation or the Department, at Department of Justice or AUSA. And in this case, it was a lawyer from the Comptroller of the Currency, who is basically representing the government in this case. And seems like a perfectly nice fellow that we're dealing with, at the that's on the other side. But why is he, being on? Why is he on loan from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, which deals with printing money and issuing, and stamping coins on there, doing this work? And it's because they cannot find lawyers at the Department of Justice. They've had such a hemorrhaging of lawyers over the last year, of people who basically, well, first off, they canceled the DOJ Fellows Program, which was a program to recruit like 1,000 lawyers right out of law school that were going to go there. They got rid of that right off the bat. So, and I'm sure a lot of those people probably would have not gone anyway. And then a lot of people just like, I didn't sign up for this, I'm out of here. So they lost just a lot of people from attrition. And then simultaneously, the only people applying for these jobs, are Trump lovers, and there's not that many of them in the legal profession on there. You don't go to law school and dream about protecting the rule of law and the Constitution, everything like that, and then get excited about working for this administration. So that is that is happening, and that is one of the things that is working in terms of the public's response to this breakdown in the rule of law. Is that all these cases that have been filed, they're being won, but also the shock and awe that the administration has been trying to use with ICE and all these announcements on a daily basis. That's a very specific strategy that they use to basically demoralize the immigrant community, demoralize the immigration bar, and get what they flood the zone essentially with so many of these things that they can't be fought in court. And the happy news is that they are being fought in court, and the government is, the strategy is not working because they don't have the lawyers to basically back up the strategy. And that is a story I don't think that's been written about very much by journalists. I have a feeling there'll be more and more attention to it, but for now, that's what we're seeing, and I'm here for it. just to say that. So that was the news on that. There was one other thing. I think there was only one other thing. There was one other piece of news, and I wanted to give a shout out to my old friend David Beer, who is at the Cato Institute. And David is, I've probably known David almost 20 years, and he is he's a libertarian, true and true. He believes in small government, and he believes in a robust immigration system, as a lot of libertarians do. I don't consider myself a libertarian by any means, but I admire they are they're very consistent in their beliefs about small government. But David said he wanted to work on this for a while. There's a report that we put out this week, basically analyzing 30 years of taxes paid by immigrants, taxes paid by U.S. born citizens, and comparing that to the benefits that immigrants receive. Because you hear this narrative all the time that immigrants basically are freeloaders. They come here essentially to mooch off the government and get this elaborate set of benefits, none of which they're eligible for. And David analyzed it, and he's got this lengthy report that has all the numbers in there year by year, and you can see, I think it says everything in this chart on here, that the taxes paid by immigrants, that little orange line right here on the lower left, compared to the dark blue lines on the bottom, that's the basically what they receive back versus what they're paying. And it looks like they're paying about twice as much in as they're getting back. Whereas Americans are basically paying, this, amount in. And then, as you can see, because of the deficit spending, they are basically borrowing and getting way more back in benefits than they are paying in. But certainly, I think the story is that immigrants pay a bunch of taxes, and they only get a small amount of money in return, whereas Americans, compared to the amount of money that they're getting back, they're paying a lot less. So I wanted to raise that because I think that it's I don't know if this will stop the debate on it, but it is we see this all the time, this argument that somehow immigrants are taking advantage of the United States in terms of benefits that they receive. And as you can see, that is not the case. So I wanted to thank David Beer. I don't know if David's watching, but shout out to him for doing this. And you can go over to the Cato Institute website and find this report and read it for yourself. Very good work for that. So, Jeannie, I think we're actually early. We've covered the topics we wanted to cover. I'm looking at the questions. There was a question about the $100,000 H-1B case. We talked about that. About the proclamation lawsuits. We talked about that. There was a question from Orlando. Are there currently any bans or pauses affecting naturalization applications? Yes. The 39 country ban has a pause on all naturalization application adjudications for countries that are in that ban. So if you're from one of those 39 countries, you can file your naturalization application, but they are not working on the application. So, and I recommend filing the applications because if you wait until after one of the lawsuits finishes, all the people who filed now, are going to be ahead of you in line. So it's just going to be a longer wait for you if you're just waiting on those cases to end. If your naturalization application is ready to go, I would go ahead and file it. Jeannie, I don't know if you agree with that, but that's my take.
I agree. I definitely agree with that.
Okay. And that looks like
I was just going to mention, we were talking before we started about the DHS buying warehouses all over the country.
Oh, yeah. We forgot about centers. Yeah. So some of you may have seen in the news, I'm just looking if I can find we didn't talk about the Grammy Awards either. That was on our list. Yeah. So ICE a list got published of 23 warehouses around the country that ICE is considering buying, some of which these sites are like, one of them was like over $100 million for it. And what has been interesting is since the publication of this list, I think a lot of people weren't aware that these plans were in the works for their community. My colleague Elisa Taub, who I think might have been on I don't know if she was on last week or not, but Elisa posted something near us in Mississippi. Roger Wicker, as the senator there, announced he was going to oppose a facility that was being considered for purchase in northern Mississippi. That's a very red area. I heard there was something similar in one of the Texas communities that was trying to do this. So Oklahoma City, their mayor said that they met with the owners of the warehouse and they're trying to get them to basically get these places to change their minds. There's a lot of real creative things that are happening on the part of these cities to try and make it very unattractive, imposing huge taxes on the property taxes, imposing all kinds of restrictions on zoning restrictions and things like that. I don't know, what's going to work, what's not going to work. But that's happening on there. So, keep an eye in the news for more of that kind of thing where these facilities were, these 23, hopefully one by one, most of them won't end up happening. And then the last, I guess, is the the news that's it's all serious stuff. But I did appreciate the Grammy Awards the other night. where there was just speech after speech that was basically attacking the immigration policies of the administration. That was the theme of the night at the Grammys, capped by by Bad Bunny, who's going to be at the Super Bowl next week, the halftime show, and probably right now, one of the 3 or 4 most probably hottest entertainers in the country. He said, quote, "Before I say thanks to God, I'm going to say ice out. We're not savages. We're not animals. We are humans and we are Americans." And that got quoted in probably every newscast in the country, every newspaper in the country. That it was to his credit, he kept it short and sweet, as far as keeping it to one sentence and making it fit very nicely into the headlines on there. But there were a bunch of speeches by Billie Eilish and Olivia Dean and others. So that's nice to see. I think a lot of people are, especially in immigrant communities, feel like sort of like, their communities are out and supporting them and all that, but it's helpful when they see that kind of thing because they know the whole country is basically watching what's happening and is not happy with it. So I think that's a good place to leave it for this week. Jeanne, I don't know if you have any closing, but that's where I'll leave it.
Yeah, I think that was a good close. And popular.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next week, and hopefully there'll be a bunch of good news stories to report next week. I always say that. It never happens.
All right, have a good one. Bye. Thank you.